Hey, it's Conservative Cat, and joining me right over there, that's Senator Andrew Chesney. Thank you so much for joining me.
So I haven't had a chance to read the GOP lawsuit that the caucus has filed because we filed our lawsuit several weeks ago that was essentially arguing the same thing.
Hey, it's Conservative Cat, and joining me right over there, that's Senator Andrew Chesney. Thank you so much for joining me on the program, Senator. We're going to tackle a couple of things today. How you doing today?
Hey, doing great. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Good. So I saw another GOP lawsuit. Now, this isn't the Illinois Freedom Caucus. I don't think you guys are behind this one. Correct me if I'm wrong. Looks like Representative Travis Weaver might have been behind this one. Senate Bill 328. It looks like they launched a lawsuit after the Illinois Freedom Caucus had launched a lawsuit regarding the budget bill, this whole gut and replace thing, which I'll have you explain for our listeners and viewers. But they also did it, some GOP lawmakers with Senate Bill 328. Can you tell me a little bit about these legal challenges to the procedure that the Democrats have been utilizing in Springfield?
Yeah, well, first of all, you're correct. The Illinois Freedom Caucus were the first to this lawsuit. We filed this lawsuit several weeks ago. The Illinois GOP in both the House and the Senate have filed a similar lawsuit challenging the three reading rule. Three reading rule is very simple. The Illinois Constitution requires that a bill is read both in the House and the Senate on 3 separate days. The challenge is the bill that they're reading has one word or one sentence in it. So the meat of the bill is not placed in the bill during the time it's being read into the record and being voted on. So you have the budget bill, for example, that is being discussed and voted on in committee and has one word or one sentence in it. And then about 2 hours before the last day of legislative session, they file the amendment and file a 4,000 page bill. And they ask us to read it in 2 hours. And so we have asked that we ultimately will ask that this Illinois Supreme Court take a look at this and relook at their decision. They had an opinion 20 years ago that said if the Speaker of the House and the Senate President certify that the 3 reading rule has been complied with, that satisfies the constitutional requirement. Okay. They can just say it is. That doesn't mean it actually was done. And the Supreme Court has held that position for the last 20 years. It is our intent with our legislation to get to the Supreme Court and ask them to revisit that opinion that was done a few decades ago.
So your lawsuit is asking them to revisit that decision.
That's right.
Okay. So where is the lawsuit at now, the Freedom Caucus lawsuit? And then I'm going to ask you to comment on the 328 one. Is it duplicative? Should the GOP lawmakers brought a duplicative or another lawsuit? Is that going to be helpful, or is it going to muddy the waters a little bit? I guess we'll start there, and then I'll ask you where your lawsuit's at, the Illinois Freedom Caucus lawsuit pertaining to the budget. So this other lawsuit has now entered the fold. What do you think about that? Is it muddying the waters? Is it a good thing? This is regarding 328, and if you're familiar with that bill, can you explain what that bill actually does?
Yeah, so I haven't had a chance to read the GOP lawsuit that the caucus has filed because we filed our lawsuit several weeks ago that was essentially arguing the same thing. Okay. I think what probably happened is when the Freedom Caucus filed the lawsuit, and there was outcry in the communities that the members represented saying, why are you not doing a similar thing? And so they repackaged a similar lawsuit to file litigation against the 3 reading rule or a violation of the 3 reading rule. That's what I suspect probably happened. They're going to have some nuanced arguments to say that their lawsuit's slightly different than ours. We believe that our lawsuits will ultimately be brought together and we will debating the 3 reading argument together. So where theirs is at in the process is very new because it was filed just a day ago. Ours has been filed for several weeks. Our court date's on July 3rd. Does it muddy the waters? It certainly potentially can. We are now being asked to partner with we will likely be asked to partner with somebody else on this litigation. Certainly, we would support any effort by any person, both members of the General Assembly and members of the public, when they see something wrong, to file litigation against the Democrat majorities. And I think that in this case, they are right to file this litigation. They're just a little late to the party on it, right? We did this just a few days after the budget was filed, after the budget was voted on. We filed this within a few days. They took a couple of weeks and are not filing actually on the budget themselves on a bill that very few people are even familiar with. So very similar litigation in terms of the idea or the scope of the argument, different bills.
Okay. Senate Bill 328. Not a lot of people are familiar with it. It pretty much makes Illinois the lawsuit capital of the world, like a magnet, right, for lawsuits, essentially.
Yeah, that's my understanding. It's a bad bill. We all voted against it. I would say the general public would be less familiar with it. It's certainly a gift to the trial attorneys. They're using that as the vehicle to argue the 3 reading rule. Our argument in the Freedom Caucus is that your taxes are going up because we don't have the ability to mount any defense against them. You're getting reparations stuck in a bill because people don't know about them. They took $40 million of property tax relief out of a bill, and they stuck a $40 million pet project for Speaker Welch to build him a new school system or sports complex or a new sports complex, right? That doesn't happen, Kat, if you have a 3 reading rule guideline where you can debate the bill, because people will be outraged. What happens is the day or day before session, typically on a Friday and a Saturday, it doesn't always have to be, they vote on these bills, and we are getting emails in opposition, and the bill's already done. It's already voted on in the House and the Senate, and the governor has already signaled that it's going to be signed into law. And so this is how the Safety Act was done. This is how the gas tax was done. This is how a lot of the awful of the awful gets constructed. And so the Freedom Caucus has decided that we are going to take this to court. Now, we didn't get the credit, not that we're looking for credit. I don't think we got the coverage we should have by some of the more traditional media markets, because they said, oh, it's just a bunch of conservative lawmakers making noise. We tested this amongst moderate Democrats, independents, and all the Republicans, and everybody agreed with us. And then we started having, your media outlets and other social media groups start picking this up, and it became widely popular in their districts, which is why I suspect the members did a similar lawsuit 2 weeks later.
Yeah. And, like you said, you don't know the nuances of their case, but we had something kind of similar with the assault weapons ban. I remember there were several cases, and what ultimately happens, they get combined. Now, I'm kind of worried because, like you said, it could potentially muddy the waters when you get into the courts and the judge gets these 2 cases, right? And he sees these 2 cases, and you're arguing this nuance and they're arguing this nuance, and they could be potentially going about this a totally different way. You guys are going about it like, hey, there was a decision made 20 years ago. We want them to revisit this decision about how the House Speaker and the leader in the Senate president, how they can unanimously kind of say, like, yes, this was done. And it could not be done, but you have to go off their word, right? Essentially, that it was done. And it's like 2 people who essentially have that, yep, check that box. The Illinois Constitution is followed, but was it? You guys are going after this nuance. You don't know what they're going after in their suit, right? The other GOP lawmakers with this bill, Senate Bill 328.
It's the same nuance. It's the same 3 reading requirement where they did, and I don't want to use Springfield language, but essentially what they say is a gut and replace. They take something in a bill that means nothing, or perhaps it was a bill, they take that entire bill out and they replace it with another bill, but it bypasses the transparency. It bypasses the ability to have it read in both the House and the Senate on 3 separate days. We're not talking an amendment where we've seen the structure of a bill and we negotiated amendments. We expect that to happen. We're saying that there wasn't even an intent to follow the rule, and they just simply either replaced the bill or they filed an amendment that included the bill.
Right. And what I'm worried about is that they're going to argue something kind of different, where maybe they go after like this is a public scrutiny type thing, where, hey, our constituents, they don't get to see the bill and they don't have proper debate. I'm not sure what their lawsuit is going to be arguing, like the nuances of it. But like, I'm thinking like a judge could see both these cases, and there's like two different ways you're going about this. It's all the same rule. You're all talking about the same rule, the 3 readings rule. But what if they argue, hey, this 3 readings rule is there in the Illinois Constitution to ensure debate and to ensure the taxpayers and our constituency get to see it for a longer period of time? What if they argue that, and I don't know what their argument is, and then you guys are arguing, hey, it shouldn't be 2 people's word that we did this. You know what I mean? So like, if there's different ways of, arguing how this three readings rule in these 2 separate cases, they could side like, hey, we're going to go with this case and you have to join this case, or you have to join this Freedom Caucus's case and you guys have to combine cases. And then one of these ways to, argue that the 3 readings rule should be, this way. I know I'm kind of being winded with my explanation here. I'm just worried that at the end of the day, the wrong argument is going to be selected here to get this done.
There's no argument. I think that there's little room for any debate that their inclusion, them filing this lawsuit certainly muddies the waters of what the Freedom Caucus has already done. I don't know that they are adding. They certainly have the right to file litigation. To be crystal clear, anytime you have somebody that wants to fight these Democrat majorities through litigation, I would encourage it. I think we should have more lawsuits against these bozos that do awful things for these taxpayers and everybody that I represent. I'm just saying it's a little convenient that they are filing essentially the exact same lawsuit on a separate bill 2 weeks later. I have great respect for many of the people that are on that lawsuit. They're good people. Many of them are good conservative people. I would just say that I don't know that they're adding to try to solve the problem. I think that they're filing a lawsuit to show their constituencies they're trying to do something, where we're actually trying to solve a problem of why these taxpayers are getting screwed, why the awful bills are getting passed, and we're trying to bring some visibility or because of the lack of transparency. I don't know what they really add, but we'll find out, as we proceed. No question.
One more thing I wanted to have you react to. This is just a quick clip. It's news that just came out. Judicial Watch, they're filing litigation over an Evanston reparations law. We're going to watch this, and I'll have you react real quick, Andrew.
Hey, everyone. Judicial Watch just filed a major federal civil rights lawsuit up in Illinois to shut down a reparations program. That's right, a reparations program up in the city of Evanston, Illinois. They're giving away $25,000 in taxpayer cash to blacks only. If you identify as white, you can't apply. If you identify as Asian, you can't apply. If you identify as Hispanic, you can't apply. This is a brazen violation of the 14th Amendment, federal civil rights law, and Judicial Watch, once again, is happy to do the heavy lifting with this major civil rights lawsuit. It's a class action to shut down America's first reparations program. The Constitution's supposed to be colorblind, but the left in Evanston and those who want to play the racial division card, they don't believe that. And Judicial Watch is hoping and praying a federal court will remind them of the rule of law.
Okay, so I just wanted to throw that out there, get your reaction, because it's just in that they were going to file a class action suit. This was, I think, a 2019 law. And this is something to do with $25,000 grants. And this was the first reparations like law, I guess, first program to be implemented in the United States. Senator Chesney, your reaction just to reparations, maybe in general, and Judicial Watch filing the complaint.
Well, I think the idea that we're going to pay somebody based off of their race or whatever is wrong. We first of all, the taxpayer should never be paying or refunding certain groups money just because of the color of their skin or their sex or their gender ideology. None of this really surprises me. This is in the Northwestern area. Governor Pritzker has his name on the law school there. They're very woke, they're very liberal, in their view, they're very progressive, and they would also argue they're very compassionate. I think they're totally out of touch. I mean, the idea that we are going to pay groups of people that have not been impacted dollar amounts just because of the color of their skin is outrageous. But I would have the same position regardless of what race they were targeting. I would have the same position across the board. We have to start having a merit-based system throughout the state and throughout the country. And the Democrats love to carve up these sections or these groups that are either marginalized in their view or potential voters or pockets of voters that have been longstanding supporters of theirs, and then try to galvanize them by telling them that the world is racist and they are being mistreated and this $25,000 will help with that mistreatment. Not a newsflash to many people, but the Democrats have controlled the state of Illinois for a half century, right? I mean, the Democrats have controlled the policies in Evanston, in the state legislature for pretty much a half a century, for 50 plus years, right? And they've had Democrat governors and they keep screaming racism, screaming about they want equity. Really what they want to do is they want to take it from somebody and they want to reallocate it to people that are supporters of theirs. All right. And that might be Black people, that might be white people, that might be woke left, progressive people in the suburbs, whoever it is. They want to just reallocate the pie and then tell them the reason they're doing that is because they're being mistreated by Republicans or conservatives or white males that are downstate. The reality is the people that are the governing body in Illinois is dominated by Democrat policies that are putting terrible people in their communities through the open border crisis, that are taxing them out of their homes, that are driving businesses out of their cities. And the only people flooding here are people that are here illegally. And where do they put them, Cap? They don't put them in Evanston. They put them in the south side of Chicago. They put them in the poorest of the poorest areas. And guess who hates it the most? The people that live there. And they divert these resources by these very vulnerable groups. And then they say, well, we're going to carve out a little thing for you, give you a few bucks to keep you quiet. Oh, by the way, we're going to pack a bunch of illegal immigrants into your communities, but here's a little money to shut up. It should be offensive, one, to the people they're targeting, they're trying to give this money to, but it should offend everybody. The idea that you are going to allocate money to people based off of anything from race, sex, gender, anything is just ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous policy. And I suspect they'll be successful in federal court.
Yeah. Well, Senator Andrew Chesney, that's coming up on our time, but really quick, tell people where they can find you. I know that I follow you very religiously on Facebook, all the things that you're a big voice in the state Senate for small businesses, specifically landlords here in the state. And I've noticed that you've pushed legislation that tries to cut back on some of this red tape that a lot of those folks are seeing. Where can we find out more about you? And can you give me one more update on this lawsuit? When is your court date?
Yeah, so it's going to be July 3rd. This is going to be the emergency hearing. You know, if we make the proper case, perhaps we do think it's a long shot to get the emergency injunction. We expect this to go through the proper channels, but we are going to try. We're going to make the argument and the case to the judge that they need to stop this today. But we expect it's likely to go through the proper channels where you would go through the lower courts and then the appellate court, and then we're going to make the argument to the Supremes. But the start of our case starts July 3rd. It's the first court date that the judge would agree to. So we are not dragging our feet. We're moving as fast as we can. We're trying to get some emergency relief. But we recognize, given the Supreme Court precedent on this issue, it's going to be an uphill climb. But that doesn't mean we're wrong. That just means we have to continue to make the case. You know, the Supreme Court, it does change their mind over time. The U.S. Supreme Court's changed their mind over time. So we're asking them to essentially reverse a decision that's almost 20 years old.
Yeah. Well, and then I'd be curious if you say the judge does temporarily, stay this budget. What would that look like for me if I'm an Illinoisan? Does that mean?
Yeah, it would. I mean, ideally, we would like to be able to go back down to Springfield and make the debate and make the case to our constituents, right? So we can mount opposition. I wouldn't have time to go on your show and mount opposition against the reparations that might have been in the state budget, or the money that they're allocating to Black Lives Matter, or some woke ideology or some woke project that they're stuffing in the suburbs of the city of Chicago. They tried to pass the Amazon tax or the pizza tax, however you want to dub it. They did that within the last 2 hours of session, right? And it's dead on arrival now for at least a while, but not because we had enough Republicans that put up the fight. Is because people in the Democrat district started to learn about it and started blowing up people's phone at 10 o'clock at night saying, you can't support this. So Speaker Welch said, hey, our members aren't real comfortable about this, because we were able to mobilize people in just a few hours. So ideally, we'd like to go back down to Springfield and have a proper debate. We recognize as Republicans, the outcome is probably going to be somewhat similar, but I don't know that you would get the Safety Act passed if it was done the proper way. I don't know you would get the gas tax passed if it was done the proper way. I don't know that you would get the $40 million for Speaker Welch's sports complex in his district if it was done the proper way. So we're asking for the ability to mount opposition or mount support for something. Now, in most cases, when they're using the 3 reading rule and they're abusing it, this is not something Republicans would support. But they're doing that deceptively because they want to disrupt the normal process and confuse the constituency. That's why they're doing it intentionally. So outcome to be determined.
Okay. Well, Senator Chesney, thank you so much. And we can find you on Facebook, right?
Yeah, Andrew Chesney on Facebook, chesneyforillinois.com on my website. It's certainly a privilege to be on here, an honor, privilege to be with you today, and thanks for spending some time with us. So appreciate it.
Of course. That's State Senator Andrew Chesney. Folks, we'll be right back.